Columbus had been without a baseball team for 5 years. Having a minor league baseball team was an expression of civic pride. City officials had relentlessly pursued a franchise and failed more than once. When a franchise was finally secured, the next step was to make sure that it would keep it. Unfortunately, the franchise was being extended through a working agreement with the New York Yankees. All of the Yankees minor league clubs had to have the Yankee name and moniker. People in town would not take well to that. Yankees, both the team and Yankees in a greater sense, were not well received in the South. If the team was to operate feasibly, ownership had to make the team likable. Beginning in 1961, there were Civil War centennial celebrations throughout the South. These also took place in Columbus. The city largely supported them. This was demonstrated through massive support for musical production of the Battle of Columbus, the last battle of the Civil War. Confederate iconography and terminology were used in all aspects of advertising and publications. A large contingent of the community felt a rebirth of Southern heritage and a renewed regional identity during the time period. Immediately after getting the franchise, the team saw resistance from the religious community regarding alcohol sales at Golden Park. Eventually, beer sales were approved, and a significant portion of Columbus was then morally opposed to what happened at the ballpark. The team had to find a way to regain lost fans despite not playing their first game. The club took advantage of the local cultural atmosphere and used the flag and the Confederate moniker. See, sports require fan bases to bond with teams. This is a key aspect. There was little hope that the target audience of the baseball team would connect with the Yankees, especially after the dispute over beer sales. The oxymoronic term Confederate Yankees was the solution for this. The ownership walked a fine line when they utilized the name and flag. During the previous 5 years, the city had touted itself as progressive in terms of race in baseball. They had sought to join the Southern Association in place of teams that were withdrawing to prevent playing against teams with black players. Baseball officials in Columbus took a stand on being tolerant, so why had the use of the name and the flag come to pass? The answer was civic pride. With all of the work that the city had done to get a team, they were not going to let the nickname of the major league club kill baseball in Columbus again. If that meant alienating a percentage of potential fans, then so be it. The experience of black players like Roy White and Jim Horsford were the casualty of keeping baseball in Columbus. And it worked, for 3 years at least. Looming over minor league baseball for the previous 2 decades had been the growing presence of television. Minor leagues in the South were dying, and Columbus experienced the same demise as other franchises. The team's last season was also the first season of the Atlanta Braves, and that was no coincidence. The creeping end of TV finally rose up from the depths and claimed the Columbus franchise. The team did not experience a lot of success in trying to find a franchise after 1959. The team was twice awarded a Southern Association berth but could not secure a franchise. The one time they did get a franchise, the organization backed out of the agreement after 1 week. Hopes of ever getting a team were dismal, and in 1962, the team's best hope for getting a team, the Southern Association, folded. The Southern Association's problems were directly tied to race. 3 teams in the league were unable to play against other teams that had black players. Their home cities had ordinances preventing the mixing of races on a baseball field. The most important of these cities was Birmingham, who was the premier minor league city in the South. The club regularly drew 100,000 fans a season. With the loss of Birmingham, the league would not be able to operate, and it didn't. Columbus had been the only hope for the Southern Association. If Columbus could get a team, the league could stay alive with a 6-team circuit. However, with Minnesota backing out of their working agreement in 1962, Columbus could not get a team. The irony in the situation is that the ownership of the Birmingham club had fought for so long to have the segregation ordinances repealed that when they had to finally give up the Southern Association, did not have enough time to find other cities to replace them. Under the leadership of team president Dick Steele, Columbus finally got a franchise. Credit must be given to Mayor Johnson, though, for his efforts in 1960. John Johnson, the farm director for the Yankees, said that B. Ed Johnson was the first person to ever come into his office and beg for a baseball team. His efforts were successful, though. In 1963, the Yankees club in the South Atlantic League was Augusta. Augusta only drew 43,000 fans that year despite winning a pennant and the league playoffs. During the 1963 offseason, the minor leagues underwent restructuring. The South Atlantic League was reorganized as the Southern League and would operate as a double-A circuit. The Southern Association had been reborn. Augusta could not stay above water before, and it certainly would not in a bigger league. John Johnson remembered his experience with B. Ed Johnson, and he gave Columbus a call. In 1950, church leaders in Columbus ran a campaign to have beer sales at Golden Park prevented. They were successful, and over the next 14 years, movements to have the ordinance repealed were shot down 3 different times. Beer and baseball are inseparable. The money losses from no alcohol sales would likely mean the death of the team from day one. The first move of Greater Columbus Baseball Inc. was to file a beer sales application in December 1963. The application passed, and the religious community promptly demanded a revote. Opposition to beer sales was organized by the Columbus Ministerial Alliance. Shortly after demanding a revote, they put together a 3-man committee to create a statement on their disapproval of alcohol. The statement passed with a vote of 23-1. The only dissenting vote was from Reverend John L. Wanger of the Lutheran Church of the Redeemer. In total, 17 different churches submitted letters of opposition to the city council. Support for beer sales came from many places. Greater Columbus Baseball Inc. spoke at the city council meeting. Reverend L. Wanger spoke in favor of it. One of the most convincing arguments for beer sales was made by retired General M.B. Bell of Fort Benning. Polls revealed that Columbus favored alcohol sales by a 2-1 majority. The application passed for a second time with a vote of 3-2. Ultimately, the council was not going to let beer sales cause the team to leave. Sponsorships from beer sales doubled the predicting operating costs of Golden Park. The team would be in the black before the season began. The city was filled with excitement for the first season. General manager Charlie Singer hired Rube Walker to manage the club. Walker previously managed championship teams in Augusta and Atlanta. Singer also reached an agreement with R.C. Cola to buy the first all-electric scoreboard in Georgia. The technological marvel took a month to install at Golden Park. Columbus finally had a team. Changing directions, let's look at what was happening around town. Columbus took part in the centennial celebrations that swept the South. The city shared a special connection to the war, and as the last battle was fought here, city officials greatly supported the celebrations. The largest of these celebrations was the Gallant City. Organized by the Stay and See Committee of Columbus, the Gallant City was described as a musical production of the Battle of Columbus. The event was massively supported by the community. Programs from the Gallant City illustrate the use of Confederate terminology and iconography in advertisements. Businesses also cashed in on the centennial. The Gallant City played in 1961 and 1962 before being brought back for the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Columbus. Opening weekend of the Gallant City happened to be the opening weekend for the Columbus Yankees as well. Few attended the Gallant City that weekend. They were all at the ballpark watching the Confederate Yankees play. This particularly angered one Columbus painter named Bunt Hood. Hood previously had a dispute with the club after the team had turned down his business offer to paint the signs on the outfield wall at Golden Park. Hood's response to the Yankee subversion of the Gallant City was to hang signs criticizing the team on the facade of his paint shop. These signs attacked both the team and other city officials. Hood's issues were with the alcohol sales and the team name in particular. Despite many of the signs being humorous, several were vulgar. The obscenities led to citizens of the town filing a petition to enjoin Hood. The hearing illustrated the type of enemies Hood had made. Many city officials testified against him. He had attacked the most powerful people in Columbus, and they weren't going to let him get away with it. More importantly, these people supported the baseball team. Roscoe Thompson, the secretary of the baseball franchise, represented the state. Judge Land heard the case. Land's son was a bat boy for the Yankees. Hood provided little defense but to reaffirm his pride in the Confederacy and to highlight his concerns with the ballpark. Hood's injunction hearing had been on July 2nd. Even though he had been enjoined, he continued to put up vulgar signs. This led to another court date on July 8th. That morning, Hood drove down to Golden Park, found an unlocked gate, and proceeded to do donuts with his truck around the infield. Spinning his tires as he made his escape, Hood yelled to the grounds crew who had done the deed. Hood wanted to be caught. Hood was promptly arrested at his paint shop. Despite being released from jail with plenty of time to make it to his afternoon court hearing, he did not show. The trial took place without him, and Hood was sentenced to 20 days in prison and a $200 fine. After submitting an apology letter to the city council and paying the fine, Hood's sentence was commuted to 4 days. Despite the off-the-field troubles with Hood, the Yankees were quite successful on the field. The club captured the first half pennant of the Southern League, which meant the city hosted the All-Star Game. The Confederate Yankees were victorious in it. The most valuable player on the 1965 team also happened to be its only black player. After a mediocre 1964 season, Roy White emerged as the league's premier second baseman. His success deterred racial taunts at home, but he was still subjected to discrimination on the road. Dick Steele often had the team stay in integrated hotels on the road, but there was no way that he could entirely prevent racial discrimination of Roy White or any other black player. Steele's best effort was to offer the players of visiting teams, whether white or black, to stay at his hotel, the Ralston. Roy's contributions greatly aided to the team's success in 1965 as he was named the Southern League Player of the Month in July, en route to the team winning the pennant. White was subsequently named the Southern League Player of the Year before being called up to the Major League club. The pennant race revitalized baseball fandom in Columbus. The team drew extremely well the second half of the season, which led to Columbus pacing the Southern League in attendance. The city had waited 5 years for a team. The championship was the culmination of the efforts to bring baseball back to Columbus. Interest in baseball had reached an all-time high in the city. Despite the success of 1965, the team met its demise the following year. For 2 decades, the specter of television had been growing. The effects of TV were felt throughout Major League Baseball, but the real effects were felt at the minor league level. Revenues fell as attendance numbers plummeted. From 1950 to 1965, the number of televisions in the United States grew by almost 43 million, and the number of minor leagues shrunk to less than half of their previous size. Compounding the effects of television was the arrival of the Atlanta Braves. For the first time, the South had a major league franchise. People didn't go to the ballpark in 1966. They stayed at home and they watched the Braves. Attendance at Golden Park dropped by 24,000 in 1966. The team drew only 48,000 fans that season. That's barely better than the Augusta franchise had done in 1963. Dick Steele requested assistance from the New York Yankees to help the team stay open for the next season, but he was refused. The Yankees were not willing to risk another year of dismal performance. In October of 1966, Steele returned the working agreement to New York. The Confederate Yankees were defeated. Despite promises that they would not broadcast games into Southern League cities, the Braves had done it anyway. The Braves looked to make about $2.5 million from television rights during the 1966 season. The wishes of the AA circuit were pushed under the rug. The Southern League pressed for an antitrust lawsuit against the Braves, but the suit never came to fruition. Southern League directors could not get enough steam behind their efforts to challenge the Braves.